Right.
Right, we're rolling. What is happening,
Are
people?
we? I'm sitting, bro. I'm not
Right.
rolling.
Before I was rudely interrupted there, I was going to do the intro. What is happening, people? Welcome to the fourth installment of the Archive podcast. You are here. You tell us earlier than we used to. Joe's just necking his coffee. Go on. Right. Welcome to episode 4 of the Archive podcast, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Let us know how last week's episode went down. Anyway, how are you, boy?
I'm not too bad. I'm ready to tackle this topic. I
Got to
feel like we're
introduce us,
educated
like,
enough.
it's your boy.
I'm Joe
Dan
Harris.
Evans,
That's
Joel
Dan
Harris,
Evans.
.pt at Dan Evans PT. If you don't know, that is my identity. Is at Dan Evans PT.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I think that's what they're going to put on the birth certificate today.
right. Tell us what we're talking about this week, boy.
So today we're going to be breaking down a question we had in week 2 surrounding the menstrual cycle, and the reason why we haven't answered it sooner
Two
is
young
because
lads
we wanted to clear. We wanted to
telling
clear
you
up.
about your period.
Yeah, because it doesn't bode well, does it? So, like, I'm 22, Dan's 23, and we're sat here chatting to you about something that we don't have and trying to educate you on something that you've gone through for however long.
The thing is, myself and Joel have had like a little bit of education around this topic in university because it is a massive consideration in performance, and we'll get into a little bit on why it is a big consideration in training and performance. So we felt like, because we had that initial insight on, the science element behind it and how, the hormonal changes relate to training and stuff. That's a perspective that ladies might not have. So the reason why you've got two 22, 23-year-olds on here telling you about your period is just because, like, of that relation to training and, that insight that you might not already have,
Yeah.
or, saves you the research. You just watch us talk about it and just be like,
Because
they've got
it's
it
something
covered
that
for
needs
us.
to be chatted about. Yeah, it's something that needs to be chatted about. There are considerations that come with it. So as trainers, I feel like it was nice to upskill myself on it a little bit, because I had the uni lecture quite a while back, and doing the research for this topic meant that everything's a little bit more fresh in the mind. It's made it a lot more relevant to me, because reading over it is like, there are a lot of things that you need to consider that sometimes you might slip back and fall into like easier routines with it. So this is why it's been good to upskill me, so I can provide the service to my clients with the extra knowledge that I've got, as well as then upskilling you guys into managing your expectations and your training around your menstrual cycle. So first of all, the menstrual cycle is the monthly series of changes that the woman's body goes through in preparation for pregnancy. Whereas us males, we have a 24-hour cycle. So our hormones don't really fluctuate or change on a daily basis. That's why we can expect similar levels of performance.
It's a little bit more linear.
Yeah, so for women, what do they need to consider? Why is the menstrual cycle something that they need to consider with their training?
Well, if we look at like training responses and like adaptations to training, it's largely a lot of that sort of like adaptation comes through hormonal changes. So you need to be in a relatively ideal state hormonally to adapt to training. So the better, like, for example, the better you can standardize your training and eating, the better your results and more streamlined your results. Whereas if you standardize your hormones, you can expect the same. You've just got one more area in which is a little bit more controlled. Whereas with a female, your hormones are changing on a weekly basis. At the start of the month and at the end of the month, you're in a completely different position, and you feel a completely different way. And there's certain elements that interfere. So you've got like motivation, you've got actual hormonal pathways of adaptation that are affected. There's a lot of things that go into like that sort of like performance puzzle in regards to, the hormone situation with females especially. And it almost begs the question whether you've got to periodize the female a little bit differently because of that sort of like difference in hormones across like a 4-week period, whereas with a male, you've pretty much got him the same state week in, week out, whereas with a female, it's different from week 1 than what it is to week 4. Do you get me?
Yeah, and that's why a lot of the studies that are done in strength and conditioning around the training stuff are focused on males because it's a lot less variables to play with. So you might see all these studies that are done with males, and the reason why is because the hormonal changes that come with the menstrual cycle can affect largely what people will experience out of training. So sometimes the studies don't really show what happened through like a training intervention, more through the hormonal standpoint. So if you think why the research won't show training changes in females a lot of the time and limit it to males, is because of the effect it has. So if researchers doing it, why aren't everyday general population doing it to manage expectations and make sure that they are making the proper progress necessary to see their results? So knowing that now, we're going to break down the menstrual cycle. And I think we agreed on the three main parts, didn't we?
Yeah, I think if you look at it as like a sort of like a 4-week phase, if we say 28 days,
Yeah,
we'll pile this whole sort of like basis on a cycle based 28 days, and we'll touch on like exceptions to the rule later on. You've got 28 days, in those 28 days, there's there's other phases, there's like sub phases, but then you've got two main phases, your follicular phase and your luteal phase and in those two phases you are in a different position hormonally, and we'll touch on like the differences between the two phases now. So Joel, if you want to touch on like the third or any more factors that
Yeah, so you've got ovulation then, and that happens is a blending period between the follicular phase and the luteal phase. So that blending period with ovulation is where you're gonna like get a large peak of luteinizing hormone, which is going to affect things differently. But we're going to come to that, so it like merges nicely between the two phases. So I think if we break it down, if we go follicular phase, go on, Dan, fire away.
So in the follicular phase, effectively your estrogen, so if you got like a graph or like a line graph, your estrogen is slowly increasing, and then towards the end the luteinizing hormone increases, and then what that does then is it just serves you in the regards to like the higher estrogen is, the higher the motivation to train is, the sort of sub effects are that the hunger is managed a little bit better. You're in your bed effectively in that phase where estrogen is getting higher, luteinizing hormone is getting higher. You're in the prime of your cycle. That's where everything's ticking over great. Like you're motivated. Your insulin sensitivity is at its best. So when estrogen is high, insulin sensitivity is at its best as well. So that just effectively means you can use carbs a little bit better. So there's another factor in with the diet. So you could be a little bit better with the nutrition in this phase. And then you hit your ovulation and then you've got, so that's on a scale, you're looking at follicular phase 1 to 13 days, isn't it? And
so it's 1 to 14 days for the follicular phase, and then ovulation is that 12 to 17 day period. So this is where you get a large surge of the luteinizing hormone, like Dan said, later on in that follicular phase. And then this is where your strength levels are going to be at their peak. So you've got a really good 2 weeks of training before, because everything, your insulin sensitivity is higher, so you can utilize your carbs a bit better. Your appetite can be managed a bit better, so the nutrition's easier to manage, and all around your training motivation is going to be higher, so you can get a really good block of training quality in, say, that first 1 to 14 day period. Then after that, when you come into ovulation, you get that large surge of luteinizing hormone, and estrogen and progesterone start to peak then. And that's where you're going to get those massive strength levels. So it works out quite nice that you can get a good 2 week block of training in before you get that peak of hormones and everything. And that's ideally where you're going to be strongest and feel your best in training. But then after there, it starts to dip a little bit. That's where the crash starts coming.
The increase, you get an increase then. So whereas in the follicular phase, you had that sort of like linear increase in estrogen. It's like an inverse sort of wave now. So estrogen is starting to decline, progesterone is inclining. So you've got that increase in progesterone that effectively then leaves you in that sort of like leading up that PMS sort of like this is where you are at the worst. So in during this time you can expect, you know, detriments in performance and motivation just because of where you are in regards to a mood standpoint relating to, you know, that hormonal change. At this point, insulin sensitivity is going to be again the inverse of what it is in the follicular phase. You're not going to be able to handle carbs as well in this phase. However, your BMR in this phase is typically higher, so you
You get that.
burn a little bit more calories in this phase.
It's
So
roughly about 200 calories, I think,
150 to
that you're
300
gonna
calories, yeah.
yeah, you're going to experience in that. So you are going to be utilizing a lot more energy than you normally would.
The
So
positive for this phase is this is where your cravings happen, which is ideal really because your calorie needs are a little bit higher in this phase as well. So if you plan your diet in or you periodize your nutrition strategically, you could potentially place the heavier diet side of it earlier on in your cycle, and then place a bit more of a relaxed sort of like diet break style sort of like maintenance towards the last 2 weeks,
yeah, and
simply
I
because of
think
that increase in caloric needs.
is good to note though, where Dan said like it's an inverse relationship. You don't see a massive drop, so it's like a general decline and a general incline. So what you can expect is obviously with our luteal phase being quite long, 14 days, 2 weeks. If you're trying to back off 2 weeks of your training, is going to be a lot harder to see progression because obviously if ideal scenario we'd be pushing it 28 days and that's what we're going to do. So with this then it is also something to realize that maybe even though you are seeing that drop in hormone, it's not going to be an immediate effect, and you can manage your training to allow this. So because you might see only a slight drop off, that mood starts to swing a little bit, then that performance only starts to decline slightly. You can still maybe get away with a good couple of days of training before it really hits. And then that's when you're like, right, I need to manage it a little bit now.
From a lot of the research that I've looked into, it doesn't suggest that the luteal phase has massive detriments from a performance standpoint, in acute performance anyway. So like you're not going to see massive differences. However, what I found is that like just like the arousal is going to be a little bit lower, and sort of like that intent element may take a hit the most, and that might have a carryover to the performance. But from a physiological standpoint, I haven't seen in any of the research that I've done any massive detriments to performance. So if you understand that from a physiological standpoint, that you're not really in a massive hole in regards to like neuromuscular capacity or, you know, fitness, it could just be down to the way you feel hormonally and affecting like your motivation to train, etc. Obviously, you're going to adapt a little bit slower. You're going to recover a little bit slower just because of that hormonal sort of change. So, like in the follicular phase, you get an increase in testosterone towards the end too. Like females, they have testosterone as well. It's the same as males. Males have estrogen. So that's where, you know, you get that surge in anabolic hormone. That's where training adaptation is best. That's where performance is at its best. But that doesn't mean that it is completely gone towards those later phases.
But at the same time, I think the reason why performance drops, like Dan said, those changing hormones can affect the overall mood and intent. And as we know, if you're not into something and you're not feeling it, the output you tend to give is reduced, which means that the training effect has a smaller magnitude. So if you're enjoying your training, you're enjoying it, you want to be there, and you're really enjoying doing what you're doing, you're going to get a lot more out of it than if you're just slogging away at something you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you might notice that reduced training effect. If you come in with a lesson mindset to it, then you'll automatically think yourself weaker sometimes. So it's good to understand that even though you might not experience that actual neuromuscular drop in strength or fitness, if you're not in a ready mindset to train, it'll have a psychological backlash on your performance as a whole. So that's why you've got to kind of manage expectations of it. And with your training around that time, if it's something that you're thinking, I couldn't think of anything worse than doing, then maybe it's not worth doing.
What I would suggest doing as well is with the managing expectations, like, you know, to even satisfy expectations, you're going to be doing some sort of like progress monitoring. Yeah. So you're going to be tracking your progress in the gym, and you're going to be tracking like potentially body weight or skin folds, or I don't know, or whatever metric you use. Those are going to be largely influenced across the cycle as well. So from the start of week 1 and the start of week 3, so the start of each phase, so the start of follicular and the start sort of like around about the start of each, the follicular and luteal phase, you're going to hold a little bit more, subcutaneous water, or you're just going to hold a little bit more water. You're going to be a little bit heavier. So obviously that increase in water is going to affect scale weight and the reading you get on the scale. And people love sort of like linearity. We've touched on that before with the training. Your weight loss isn't going to be linearized typically, just because you've got an increase and then potentially a decrease and then another increase and then potentially another decrease in weight weekly, just because of that hormonal change. Might not necessarily be because your body composition is changing week to week.
No.
But you're potentially not going to notice the changes as much because you may be, holding weight. So it's probably better to compare two metrics, maybe the start of a cycle, so progress mode at the start of each cycle, or at 2 points in. So you got, point A and point B where you measure. So you could potentially measure weight at the start of week 1 and potentially week 3, and compare the loss on the two metrics rather than just from a weekly perspective. Do you get me?
Yeah, or you can use this as a time, your performance is going to be better in certain points. So you only compare your performance in that period of the menstrual cycle with later menstrual cycles. So if you're looking at day 17 performance, you look at day 17 performance in the next menstrual cycle. You don't compare that to another part in the menstrual cycle where you might reduce performance, or you might be increasing scale weight because of that extra water that you're holding on to. So that's something that a lot of people look into, and it's that thing of they're always trying to drive that linear progress. This applies for males as well. There's going to be a multitude of factors that affect why you jump on the scale, and you might see a different result. So you could have eaten a big meal, might not use the toilet, might have drunk a bit more water, might have ate something that holds more water. So all those play a factor in what happens when you step on that scale. And there's a couple of ways you can go about it. So like I said, you can compare a month to month. So you're looking at my weight at the start of this month was this, my weight at the start of the next month was this. 4 weeks is usually a big enough period to see change. Or if you're a bit more patient and you trust the process a little bit more, you can use each day's weigh-in and get weekly averages and then compare week to week from cycle to cycle, rather than looking at one day and taking that value at face value, and then you're down here the next day, and then you're up here. You might see that if you average that out, you're on a general decline, which is what we're looking for. So try not to take the weight at face value, because that's a big thing in motivation at the minute with people relying on the scales. They'll look at it and go, oh, I'm up a pound today. What's a pound? You know what I mean? That can change quite drastically. If you're noticing those pounds creep up over time, that's a problem. But at the same time, if you're noticing that it's staying roughly consistent and you see that general drop off, that's what we're looking for. But
Yeah.
that's why I always try and say, if you are using the scale as a metric to track progress, use progress photos as well.
Yeah, ultimately, a combination of both would be your best measure. And I understand that, again, like at certain phases in your cycle, you're going to be a little bit more bloated. You get that bloat. That has a psychological effect. So as long as you understand where and when you are in your cycle, and then relate that back to, the reasons why you potentially could be not seeing the results you want, is entirely down to because if you've got everything else ticked off, there's no reason why you shouldn't be making these changes. You're just not seeing them as quickly and as obvious as you want because of these other influencing factors like bloating, water weight. All these hormonal changes will have a change on your physical appearance.
Yeah, and
massively.
with that, I think we've always talked about tracking metrics and making sure that everything is like being tracked, is being used. So we talk about these different stages in your menstrual cycle. There are several apps. I've just Googled it now. There are several apps out there that allow you to track your menstrual cycle. I don't know how they work. I've never used one for obvious reasons, but with these, you can put in when you experience your period, and if it's routine, you'll start to see those where you are in that menstrual cycle then of which part. So you can use that data and link it to your progress photos, your weight, your performance in the gym, to actually understand where you are and then compare those metrics based on where you are in your cycle. So if you're not tracking your menstrual cycle, I think you should start to get a grips of where you are and how your menstrual cycle runs. Because obviously there's going to be individual differences from person to person. And the only way you're going to get an understanding of yours is understanding yours. So you've got to look and you've got to use the data that your body gives you, input it in, and use that wisely then to make decisions on your training. So I think we've covered the menstrual cycle as a whole. So we've said what the phases that are involved, what happens during each phase, and this is all based on if you experience a normal period, so your eumenorrheic. But with females, there's something called the female athlete triad, which you need to consider. And the female athlete triad is just three things that all link in with each other. So it's
basically
based
female
off your
risk
menstrual
factors.
cycle. Yeah. So it's based off the menstrual cycle, your bone health, and energy availability and things like that. So what usually happens is they all link in. So with your menstrual cycle, if you're eumenorrheic, it tends to mean that you're eating the optimal amount of calories. You're not in sufficient or serious energy deficiency, so your bone health isn't compromised. But then athletes often push in. This is more for competitive athletes that are pushing like low body fats with high endurance / like high like caloric demanding sports. You might often lose your period, and then this is where it all becomes a little bit that you need to manage, and you need to make sure that you are getting back to optimal, because essentially if you don't have the sufficient amount of calories, your body's going to look to save, and this is where you might lose your menstrual cycle to save extra calories. So your body's trying to cling on to as much as possible. And then with that, your bone health can become compromised. Females are more at risk at developing osteoporosis, which is like the degradation of the bones, so they're becoming a bit more fragile. And this whole like triangle needs to be managed. So that's why it's always a good metric to track your menstrual cycle to ensure that there is no abnormal changes, and with this then that you are managing your energy intake and output as well, as then that will help with your bone health. That's why females should look to resistance train and use some kind of strength training metric to make sure that they are emphasizing bone health as well, and not just doing high endurance things. They need that element there to make sure they're looking after the whole triangle and everything runs smoothly then.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit on the female athlete triad and the things that you need to expect when you're training and manage.
Basically, ladies, 28 days. The first 2 weeks of your cycle, you're all good to go. The second 2 weeks, expect that you ain't going to be able to lift for shit effectively, and understand that that's all right.
But there's the middle point in the middle. You've got your first part, push it. The first 2 weeks, push it. You've got the second 2 weeks, pump the brakes, but it's a slow decline. You're going to notice a peak in performance around that 15 to 17 day mark, but then you'll have a gradual decline in performance then. And at that point, that's where you manage accordingly. Maybe you look at changing the way you train. So if you're pushing heavy strength training for the first, say, 18 to 19 days, then maybe you drop back slightly. You change your style of training. You go for a bit more low intensity cardio if that's something you're doing. You then look to use machines a little bit more, where you haven't got that massive like motivation factor where you need to get under a heavy barbell, stabilize everything. You can kind of rely on the machine a little bit. And then from there, it repeats itself, 28-day cycle. So manage your expectations around this time.
Yeah. So
don't compare bits in each cycle and then compare cycle to cycle. That's like the brief overview of it.
Because you've pretty much got a position in your cycle where you are, at the best position to complete tasks. So technically demanding movements like Olympic lifting or, CrossFit, that kind of thing. You're going to be at a better position to do that at that late follicular phase where you get that spike in, luteinizing hormone, testosterone, that kind of thing. And then there's going to be times where training is going to be suboptimal and you're in a suboptimal state to complete like any performance tasks or, complex movements,
and then
max efforts, that kind of thing.
That can tie in with your competition schedule. So if you are an athlete competing, why don't you utilize this to your advantage and make sure that you go in and you try and plan your competition schedule around that I'm going to feel good part of the cycle rather than
like you can't have any influence on time and date of competition to relate to your menstrual cycle, but you can get a little bit of an informed, sort of perspective on how you're going to perform on that day, so you kind of know where to go.
But at the same time, when you say you can't choose what time and date you perform, if you're a weightlifter, there's going to be certain competitions. There's going to be some competitions that you need to make sure that you're a set in place. So if your qualifiers are normally a set date each year, you attend that qualifier and you've got to qualify there. But then sometimes qualifiers can be placed all throughout the year and you've just got to hit, for weightlifting, for example, you've got to hit your specific total in one of these comps. Yeah, so if you try and track your menstrual cycle and you see there's a competition that lines up with the green light, you go.
Shoot shot, yeah. I get you.
So we've talked about the training side of things. Let's touch on the nutrition a minute. So we've gone in a little bit of detail with insulin sensitivity and stuff. How would you put in a framework for females that are looking to get a grip to their nutrition around their menstrual cycle? What's some things you could implement that would mean a more successful dieting phase?
I would say if you're a female and you do track your menstrual cycle, you do know where, most females know where they are on their cycle. So if you know you're in that first phase, that's a great time to start a diet. Just because you've got, all systems are going in that early phase. And insulin sensitivity is good. You partition carbohydrates better. You use them better. So at that point, like, your ability to, you know, use food is better. In the later phases, you know, I would just suggest increasing calories to accommodate for that increase in cravings, just because you've got that sort of like BMR aspect where it kind of allows you to eat a little bit more anyway. So time the increase in food with that just makes the most sense. Like, why would you not do that? Um, Otherwise, I don't think that there's such a difference in, you know, insulin sensitivity where you've got to reduce carbs to a massive degree in that second phase. However, you know, understand that that may be another factor in how you might not be performing well because you're not utilizing carbs as well as you should be, or, you know, it's just another sort of like notification that you can get for yourself to inform other decisions. Do you get me?
Yeah. So what I would say is females, you're going to notice that increase in BMR anyway during that second 2-week period of your cycle. So there, you can increase your calories and still be in a similar calorie deficit to what you would be at the start. But at the same
Yeah.
time, because you've got those cravings and that can lead to binge eating. So when you experience cravings and you're on restricted calories, it can tend to go a little bit overboard. So if you're at risk of binging and potentially spiking your calories massively, why don't you make the informed decision and the smart choice to increase your calories anyway to accommodate these cravings and not ruin it? So it can be that I've binged, I've had a bad week, I've eaten everything, or it can be I've eaten a little bit more than I normally would. Yes, I'm probably not in the same calorie deficit that I would be. I might be at maintenance, but I've also managed my cravings accordingly. I haven't gone out, binged it, and then potentially spiked my calories. So I'm in a calorie surplus throughout the month.
Mm.
Be a bit smarter, educate your nutrition and maybe your times when you're going to push a diet and sometimes when you're not. Depending on your goal, that's why a lot of bikini competitors and female bodybuilders will lose their menstrual cycle, is because their goal is to get so lean that messes up hormones anyway, as well as the low energy availability because they're training, they're reducing
The
their body
deficit is
fat.
so high.
That's why they might experience the loss of the period, but that's something that they know going into it, and that's their risk of competing. Same for CrossFitters. They're at a really low body fat to be optimal in their sport. They're doing a sport which has high caloric needs while they're managing their calories as a whole. Their menstrual cycle is going to be out of whack, and that's going to lead them at risk. If we go back to that female athlete triad, energy availability is down. They go amenorrheic, and then you've got osteoporosis problems. So it all needs to be managed, and sometimes is risk reward with the sport. So being a high level athlete isn't good for you. No matter what sport you're in, if you're a high level athlete, you're going to be neglecting certain periods, certain parts of your life because you're committed to a sport. And if you go two ends of the spectrum, you go 0 and you're 100. Usually if you're in the 100% region, that's where you're going to get problems no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're looking at. So just make sure that you're managing everything accordingly. I don't know what Dan's doing.
But there's a weird sound. I don't know if you can hear it. Like a
No,
motorbike or
bro.
something?
Yeah, motorbike on your roof,
No.
is it?
Sorry,
So
ignore
yeah,
me.
I think that's the menstrual cycle as a whole anyway. I
Yeah.
think we've covered the nutrition side of things, putting a framework in for there, the training side of things, putting a framework in for there, explain a little bit about it so we're not just waffling shit, and hopefully that should keep you covered. Obviously, we
Effectively,
do the
yeah. Effectively,
one.
you've got a good 2 weeks and a not so good 2 weeks.
Yeah,
And, you know, align your training
with
implementations
that.
around those.
So, as you know, we do the breakdown where we answer any questions that have come from the podcast. So, I know we've touched on it in a bit of detail here, but if you have any more questions surrounding the menstrual cycle and how it's affecting you, one thing is a lot of the contraception out there artificially gives you the hormones. So when you give those hormones artificially, then you knock off your natural body clock and your rhythm of hormone secretion. So that could have a role in the overall cycle as a whole. So if you're on contraception where they're giving you like the progesterone, it might make things a little bit different for you as a whole. But if you need any more advice surrounding that, we'll answer it in the breakdown at some point for you.
Happy
So,
days.
topic
Got
one,
some
tick.
listener questions.
First one, the next bit is the old rant in the fitness industry. So, we're going to be bringing this one in as a little thing because my screen time at the minute is probably 7.5 hours.
It's a long
on
time
my
to
phone.
be looking at shit on your phone.
Exactly. And it's got the point where I see a lot of shit and a lot of shit that I'm sick and tired of seeing now.
A lot of shit.
We basically come up with this section as a little educational rant. It's not just going to be slagging it off. Could be in some parts, but basically,
you gotta love a good slagging off.
One thing I've been seeing is combination exercises. So
combination exercises and some complexes that I see.
So for me, I've been seeing pairings of exercises just because they look good for social media.
Yeah.
Just because something looks good, it doesn't mean it is good. For example, if you're performing a lunge high pull, which I have seen, right?
Yeah.
You're probably getting suboptimal adaptations from the lunge because you cannot high pull something you can lunge. Your legs are going to be a lot stronger than your arms. So if you're lunging and high pulling the same weight, you're going to be getting suboptimal adaptations in at least one of those, probably both of them. So
I'll play devil's advocate here and say that, what if it's not there to be a lower body exercise or an upper body exercise? What if it's there to be I don't know, maybe some sort of twisted dynamic core exercise where, you've got that transfer from the lower body. What's your call for? Transfer force from the lower to the upper extremity and vice versa.
Then at that point, I'm going to get to my nice little bit at the end because these combination exercises are usually good to jack your heart rate up. Yeah. So CrossFit, they do a lot of thrusters, they do a lot of wall balls, they do things like that where you've got to combine lower body to upper body. You're getting a lot of joints moving, you're putting your body through a lot of work, you're going to be doing a lot of work. But at the same time, if you're going to pair a squat and a shoulder press, I know for a fact people usually squat more than they shoulder press.
They always squat more than they shoulder press. I've never.
I'm not going to say always because I've seen some of those gym bros, right? All chest, no legs.
Yeah.
So you can usually squat more than you can shoulder press. So if you're, for example, in CrossFit, you're doing a thruster, usually at 42 kilos. Your shoulders are probably going to tire out before your legs, but the main thing that's going to tire out is your fucking lungs.
Yeah, engine.
And that's where it is good for. But it's the people that are programming these workouts now because they look good for Instagram. So the lunge high pull. Why don't you do a couple of sets of lunge where you can load up optimally, a couple of sets of high pulls where you can load up optimally, get the optimal rest period, and do that there. Where Dan was saying, playing devil's advocate a little bit with these exercises that transfer core.
Can I just say I don't actually feel that way, though?
No, I know, but those exercises may have their place, but for 99% of the people out there, they're just a gimmicky exercise that isn't necessary.
What do you think of the bear complex?
Right. I've got mixed reviews.
Because I've had a rant about this to people before.
Right. I'm trying to find the reason why I've got mixed reviews about the bear complex. So I like the bear complex. I feel it's a work is originally done as a workout in CrossFit. So you've got 7 rounds of clean front squat, push press, back squat, push press. And the goal in the workout is to do 7 rounds of that without dropping the bar. And then you increase weight, and you've got 5 rounds to build to a max weight. Whatever weight you fail at, that's your score for the workout. When it's done as a competitive workout where you're trying to push it and get like a score, is fine. And I've done the bear complex. It's something that is a little bit circus lifty. You get a bit of fun from it and all that. But as a training method, say you was to program someone 3 sets of 3 on the bear complex, they're not getting.
My opinion is that you should never ever program the complex. You should never program the output if you wanted. Like, it's like me programming football drills in my program. That's the output at the end of like the program. Like the competitive, output of doing the WOD, not using it as a training method, because just the complexity of that movement, the injury risk, it just goes through the roof, Chief. And doing that under fatigue, and I would say build up the movements, the prerequisite strength and engine, and then put the pieces together in the competition. But I see people doing it in the gym, just with no rationale, and they just ripping bay complexes on the platforms, and I'm like, fuck, bro.
So this is my thoughts on the bear complex.
Yeah, get fucked.
That was mid bear complex. I dropped it on my back, missed my back. But what Dan's saying about getting it looks good for Instagram and things like that, they're fun to do. Pushing yourself for a max bear complex is fun. But then there's a certain degree of, you need to be able to clean so much. You need to be able to front squat so much. You need to be able to push jerk so much.
And you need to be really fit. You need to have a good engine to manage that.
But at the same time, if you get stronger at the clean and get stronger at the front squat and then get stronger at the jerk, your bear complex as a whole is going to be
sub-max. Yeah, because your capacity is increasing, so the relative intensity of that complex is going to be less. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, so, but at the same time, if you get more efficient at the bear complex and build a better engine, you're going to get better at the bear complex. But at the same time, the bear complex is just a workout with an output score. Like, when you're looking to build your 1 rep max on a squat, you don't 1 rep max squat. You tend to work in that sub-maximal range, building strength, not testing it. So that's where I think those sorts of like complex exercises are good to look at on Instagram. They're good. They're fun to push yourself. Like Sonny Webster, for example, he's changed the face of weightlifting, becoming a more accessible sport because of the stupid shit that he does. Like, no one should, I'm trying to think some of the stuff he does, like clean with no arms, catch overhead into like a squat jerk. No one should be doing that, but it's fun. He enjoys doing it. He's developed the strength to do it. But at the same time, it makes weightlifting more enjoyable to watch. It provides those like, oh, that's fun to do. That's fun. He's having fun with it. And I think training should be about having fun. But at the same time, there's stupid training as well. And you can fall into the category of training for fun and optimal as well.
Yeah.
But it's trying to balance the both. If you're coming in every day, putting your bear complex on, and that's part of your workout, why don't you just get better at cleaning, get better at front squatting, and get better at jerking? You're going to get optimal adaptations there because you can program accordingly because there's less factors in play. And then if you increase the ceiling of your squat, jerk, clean, your bear complex is going to automatically rise up. So that's why I don't like these combination exercises. Yes, they should be included if you're looking to get a sweat on and do HIIT workouts and things like that, where you want to try and keep your heart rate elevated for longer. But if you're doing it to build muscle or gain strength, then at the same time, you should look at maybe splitting your lunge to your high pull, doing 4 sets of lunge, 4 sets of high pull, and then you're going to get optimal weight, optimal rest times. You're not going to have an influencing factor from the first exercise. Therefore, you're going to get better adaptations from it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first rant in the fitness industry.
Oh, I haven't done my rant.
Go on then.
Right, a quick one. My rant is just like, do you know those like montage of like booty workouts, and they like plyometric booty building workout, and with like a bander on the knees doing like sideways flippy box jumps on a step, and I'm like, plyometrics are not gonna. I don't know why people are tying the word plyometric again attached to the term plyometrics, and then relating that then to like a hypertrophy training method. One, you don't ever use plyometric and hypertrophy in the same sentence, do you? No. So, like, that's my right. I'll keep it short. Like, just basically any Instagram bio or Instagram caption you see plyometric booty building workout, fucking sack it off.
Yeah, and I think what
Like,
people don't realize
just look at it and just go, yeah, block. Or because like they like box jump squat like pulse like hip pulses like. Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you getting out of that? Just grow up.
So I'm going to play like devil's advocate here, but what if they're doing it for cardio reasons and like they want to jump up to what should they put in place to make sure they can efficiently
But you wouldn't do a plyometric or any sort of ballistically jumpy things as a cardio method because again, repeated
but
jumps.
It gets you out of breath, bro.
But
They put them in these workouts, right? Because they get
like,
people out of breath. If I asked you to jump on the spot 10 times as high as you can, you're going to get out of breath.
Yeah,
so
but then
why isn't that
I'd
a
have
good cardio workout?
But then my fucking patellas would be screaming at me saying like, "You dickhead, stop jumping up and down for 10 minutes."
Yeah, but
You know what I mean?
like it's got me out of breath. I've had a good workout. I'm dying.
I don't know if you guys probably be able to tell John's being sarcastic.
But like I'm really out of breath. Like I've just done my workout of box jumps into squat jumps into
you're out of
plyo
breath.
lunges.
Are you out of breath? Oh, well,
I'm dying.
you got fucking 10 minutes of box jumps left to do, son.
Yeah, but I'm dying
and then
though.
you're in
I've had a good sweat on.
and then you're AMRAP burpees for 5 minutes. So
But I'm out of breath,
better
bro.
freshen up, chief.
So no, but I'm really out of breath. I've had a good sweat on. I'm dying. I've had a good workout. I'm gonna go back. You've got to. You're trying to sway me away from this, bro. Come on.
Well, effectively, you're just at risk. You're just risking your longevity. How long do you want to do these fitness classes for? How long do you want to be in fitness for? Because the reality is, you're not going to be fit and healthy in the terms of like you'll be able to move well because you'll have knee pain and you'll have.
Why will I have knee pain though? Like I'm not experiencing it now. If it's not you now,
How many
should
classes you've done? How many hit class? I mean, if it.
I do like 4 week. I'm
4
fine
week.
now though.
When did you start?
Yeah. I started 6 months ago. I'm fine. I had no knee problems.
Well, maybe those type of workouts are for you then, but you must be an exception to the rule or a well-trained individual that can manage that level of stress and the fatigue.
I'm glad you said that last little bit now. So what would warrant someone like having, you mentioned plyometrics, what would warrant someone having like the prerequisite levels of strength to be able to perform plyometrics efficiently? Low level plyometrics now. We're not talking about 60 centimeter drop jumps.
What do you mean? Like why are they doing plyometrics?
So, for example, say they put in box jumps in a workout, like because it's a typical CrossFit thing. So the way I'm looking at it in CrossFit, box jumps are programmed a lot, things like that, where you've got to jump and land. low-level plyometrics. What would warrant someone being strong enough and fit enough and have the capacity to be able to perform them safely?
I don't understand your point. I don't understand
So
where you're going with
basically,
this.
what I'm trying to get at, if you're doing box jumps, there's an
Yeah.
element of jumping, there's an
Yes.
element of landing, and
Yes.
there's an element of force absorption. So what I was
Yeah.
trying to get at there is a lot of people, if they can't jump properly
They can't land.
or land properly, and they're doing them repeatedly, that's where you're going to be at risk for injury. So when I said about like the 6 months I've been doing it, I've been perfectly fine. That would be when Dan said, "Oh, you must be well trained." I
Yeah.
think that's something that you're missing. Plyometrics is a high skill exercise. So if you're trying to jump and land and you don't have the prerequisite strength and capacity to jump and land properly, you're going to be experiencing problems, I feel.
And to do that quickly.
Yeah, and to do that under fatigue. You're going to be
Mhm.
experiencing some sort of problem. The reason why CrossFitters and things can get away with doing high rep box jumps, for a start, they're really well conditioned. They're like in great shape. They've done so many. They didn't just start out first workout and do millions of box jumps. They've learned how to squat, which is the fundamental of landing. Your squat position should be your landing position. They've learned how to jump. They're not jumping maximally, and they're landing. They know how to land. So that's why people can get away with it. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm having a rant about plyometrics now as well. But for beginners that don't jump, don't land, and then you program it in a HIIT class where you're jumping and landing all the time, that's where you're going to get problems.
My thinking is as well, plyometrics, like if we're going to be like really pedantic and, plyometrics is like a power development exercise or like a metric, like a method to develop power. Like power is just like one expression of force quickly, yeah. If you're tying that into hypertrophy, what do we know about hypertrophy? It's a sustained effort to break down muscle tissue. You're not going to do a high impact ballistic plyometric to break down muscle tissue. Like there's just the nonsensical element. Like it's like if you want to get big, you're not going to go and squat 3 reps, for sets of 3. That's pretty much a well accepted, 10 to 12 for, muscle gains, 1 to 3 or 1 to 6 for strength. People understand that, but people are not understanding that, like, a plyometric isn't going to, give you any sort of like hypertrophy. It might have some sort of, effect where you got that the muscle fiber stimulation, but at the end of the day, you're not going to do them solely for hypertrophy.
No, and I think there was an article that come out. If you are doing circuit training for optimal calorie expenditure, I think the article states that normal resistance training, where you go through your traditional training, so like your squats, your bench, your deadlift, your whole session, you burn more calories through that than circuit training. So if you are looking to expend more calories, break down muscle fibers for optimal repair to grow your muscles, then you're probably looking at maybe include circuit training if you enjoy it, but don't argue the fact that it's better for calorie expenditure than one or the other. You know what I mean? But we've got our 2 little rants. So one was on combination exercise, the other one on plyometrics. Yeah. I think on our listener questions now, we have got the first one, how to adjust your calories for a big night out.
Oh, he's on the bevs.
He's on the bevs.
He's on the bevs.
We're talking
Again,
big
like I
Zoom
think
call.
I touched on this before. Like personally, I would just like understand that like depends what beverage you go for, but if you're going for like a beer or an ale or cider, there's calories in it. How many calories in a gram of alcohol? 7 calories per gram of alcohol.
Right, I know we haven't got the answer to this, but do you think you digest all the calories from alcohol? Because
I don't know if I don't know if it's like a macronutrient like serves like for energy.
no, but like not for energy purposes. But do you know like the whole term beer belly? Like
Yeah.
that's obviously comes into play, and there's a reason why it's termed as because when you drink, there's extra calories. But do you think, so for example, you're going a big night out. I'm going to do some math, right? If you're smashing Coronas, right?
It's like 1,200 calories.
Is it? So
12
Corona
Coronas is
calories.
about 1,000 calories.
So you're looking at 135 calories per bottle. Say then you go out on a night out, you're like me, you sink about 20 of them. That's 2,700 calories.
Exactly.
You add your food on a night out, so that's depending on what you have, can range from.
It's 1,000
We're not
calories.
going to put a limit on that. But do you think you digest those two? Like, do you think all those 2,700 calories are like stored? Because I don't know. Like, I've heard some people talking about. I think it was a research paper. I think it yeah, Taki Chunder.
Yeah.
But I've heard a research paper that was something like, where do the calories from alcohol go? And I think that was the type, like, it's along those lines, but basically saying that, where do they go? Because some, like, this guy was on about, they don't all get used, so what happens to them? But I don't know, that's just another, that was a side
They
tangent
would just get
then.
pissed out, wouldn't they?
Yeah, but like, I don't know. I want to do some more research on that because I feel like that's.
But anyway, if you know you're going to be,
listeners.
it's the same with anything. If you know you're going to be in any position where you will be deviating from plan, just backload everything for that specific like occasion. So just maybe cut your calories throughout the day, cut your carbs and fats throughout the day, and then get bevved up in the night. I think that's
right. Next question
as well.
Don't do anything I wouldn't do.
Yeah.
So what's more impressive? So option A, a 500-pound squat into then running a 5-minute mile, or a 500-pound squat then completing an Ironman.
Right. What I will say is you've given one standard for one and not for the other. So you've said run an Ironman. You haven't said how fast, but you've given me a 5-minute mile. So you've told me he's running a mile in 5 minutes after a 500-pound squat. I would say just based on that is more impressive, because your ability to run for a mile that quickly after you've just done a massive, massive squat is, it's going to be lower.
Yeah.
But like, how fast was the Ironman? And like, because that Ironman is such a long bout, that one instance of squatting isn't going to have such a massive residual effect on the Ironman. Do you get me?
Yeah.
Just because it's so long.
I was opting for the 5-minute mile as well. But I feel like, I know it's not comparing to an Ironman. I've done the super total and run a half marathon. And then I don't think my super total took too much like out of my running time. Like, my half marathon was going to be shit anyway. I've never ran more than 5K. But at the same time, I feel like if I hadn't have done the super total before it, would I have shaved like 5 minutes off it? Might have, because my heart rate was already jacked up because I was caffeine to my eyeballs before going into it. So I feel like the Ironman is such an extreme feat of endurance, and a 5-minute mile versus an Ironman, I'd say an Ironman's more impressive. But if you add the neuromuscular fatigue generated from a squat
on top of that 5 minutes,
on top of such a high, highly demanding power output, that's where it comes into play a lot. And I don't think anyone's done a 500-pound squat into a 5-minute mile yet. I've seen someone do it in 5:14.
After that 500-pound squat, you are going to feel like toast.
But then that's the thing. It depends how strong you are. If you're to this point where a 500-pound squat isn't that demanding, your mile time is, you don't expect to be running a quick mile time.
But the thing is, like, could you imagine like a really high level CrossFitter to be able to do that, just because their strength level is so high anyway?
So,
but like 500-pound squat to a CrossFitter.
What's that? 200. Yeah, what's 500-pound squat? 227. Yeah. So I think if you're like the biggest deadlift at the CrossFit Games was 600 pound, I think, by Patrick Vellner, and that was 2018. I'm trying to think back to the super total that they did. So there was a CrossFit super total, and I think Royce Dunn won it. And did he hit a 500 pound squat? Yeah, he must have. I know there was like a couple of 100 kilo overhead presses in there. So yeah, I think a 500 pound squat is nearing max for CrossFitters because they don't need the abundance of squat strength. And then to run a 5-minute mile, that's an impressive feat of athleticism as it is. Whereas, yeah, like I think the main thing is the 500 pound squat with 5-minute mile is more impressive because of the standardized 5-minute time.
Yeah.
And like the ability to produce that force over 5 minutes of high magnitudes. Whereas an Ironman is more of a mental endurance thing.
And it's a prolonged bout of like...
Yeah, it's a prolonged bout, so you're
system.
not using those higher threshold motor units. You're not tapping into the type 2s, which are going to be fatigued. You're going to look to reserve your heart rate a little bit for a longer period of time. So that's why I think 5-minute mile. Both are impressive, though. You can't really take that away. Anyone who runs Ironman is a little bit tapped upstairs. Like,
you're never in the right mind to tackle something like that, are you?
Have you seen the distances for it? I'm going to go, like, for anyone that doesn't know, an Ironman, not a film. I typed an Ironman on Google, Tony Stark come up.
R.I.P.
Ironman distances, right? A 2.4 mile swim, that is absolutely monstrous.
Yeah.
Like, I can't even...
I couldn't walk after that.
Oh, then we've got a 112 mile bike, which is like seriously long. And then you've got to run a marathon at the end of that race.
Yeah, what is a 500 pound squat going to do once to that? It ain't going to have that big of an effect, is it?
No. So that's why. Anyway, next one. And the final question. Thoughts on training every day? So when we had this question, Dan was like, it's too vague.
Too vague. Can't answer, that's too vague. No, it depends. What are you training every day? People are going to get so pissed off of the... It's not just me that says it, but like it does. It depends. What are you doing every day?
So give some explanations where it's probably a viable option and give some explanations where you think it's not viable.
I mean, if you're bodybuilding, training every day probably won't hurt you. If you spread the volume and, you know, the split across the week, you know, if you can get 7 sessions in, why not? If you can handle 7 sessions, then do 7 sessions. If 7 sessions is, you know, adequate for you, then do it. However, if you're trying to develop, like, I don't know, or train it, like most athletes train every day. This is what I'm saying. Like, if it's just strength training 7 days a week probably is excessive. Would you agree?
Yeah, because you've got that neuromuscular fatigue building in, your readiness to train, you're not going to have the same output.
Like, you're always going to be in the hole from a neuro perspective. Like, residual fatigue, which is, or peripheral fatigue, so fatigue in the muscle where you've like DOMs and stuff, that's fine. If one muscle is sore and then you just train the other muscle group, you know, on the next day, that's fine, because then one's recovering, one's resting, one's recovering. Whereas a neuromuscular, you know, stress is everywhere. It doesn't bias upper or lower extremity to the point where it would make much of a difference, where you're stronger upper body than you are lower body because you trained lower body yesterday. Do you get me? You're always going to be neurally drained. So if you're doing 7 days a week of that, probably not optimal, because you're giving yourself no room for recovery. So you're not getting that super compensation. You know, you're getting yourself in that hole, and then you're not having that initial spike. You're just constantly on that downwards, you know. But if you're doing 2 different outputs, so like you're training, I don't know, say you're an MMA fight, for example, you're going to need probably more than 7 sessions in that week. Because you got your grappling, you've got your wrestling, you've got your striking output, whichever you do. And then you've got sparring sessions on top of that, and you've got your strength work. You have to train 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So it ultimately
Otherwise you won't
depends
fit
on
it
what
in.
you're doing. Yeah, there's not enough time in.
So I think the main case in point of training every day is if you can recover from it, then it's not a problem. But as soon as recovery starts to take a hit because it's poorly managed, then that's when you're going to run into issues and you shouldn't train every day. For me, I know for a fact I can't perform if I train 7 days a week when it's my high strength output in preseason stuff. So I'm doing a lot of volume. I'm doing a lot of heavy strength stuff as well. I know for a fact my training is going to take a hit because lower body takes it out of me. I'll train heavy deadlifts, heavy squats, and I'm zonked. I come in, I can get away with training heavy uppers then, but I'm in a little bit of a hole then for the next 2 days. If I was to train in those sessions, it needs to be active recovery, really, really light, like brisk walking, something that's going to keep my intensity really low and doesn't raise my, it comes back to keeping your lows low and your highs high. If your highs are really high and you're trying to do that 7 days a week, it ain't happening, chief. If you've got your high days, which are really high, and your low days, which are really low, because active recovery has shown to promote quicker recovery times than just rest completely, but then is managing that active recovery so it is active recovery. I know one of my clients, won't mention any names, his active recovery is completely different to what an active recovery should be. And I think you start to realize now that your active recovery days need to be really low output and just enough to get some sort of signaling and get the body moving. It shouldn't be another training day.
Yeah, don't go running 10K the day after a squat session as active recovery. No matter how low intensity it is, if you're running 10K, you're going to get so much ground contact. Running is high.
So much force.
Running is not a low intensity effort in any.
But even if you keep your heart rate down, if you're really fit, you keep your heart rate down and stuff, you might get away with it. But if you're a heavier bloke that's not the most efficient at running and you run on concrete, you're going to be experiencing some sort of residual fatigue in the next session.
Yeah.
So thoughts on training every day works. The Bulgarians did it, but you saw the longevity of their lifters. If you don't know, Bulgarian weightlifting, squat every day, and they basically trained everything every day and maxed out. Their longevity, they were really good, but they went straight down. Their athletes were known as injured. The coach was known as the Butcher because he didn't really have any well-being for his athletes and ruined them. Whereas the Russians took a more, let's train a little bit sub-maximal, keep training there, then peak, then come back down. And a lot of their sessions were probably not max effort, and they had a bit more longevity because they managed it well enough. They probably trained every day, but they managed it well. So if you can manage your training, we can go into that.
All that gear.
So yeah, if you can manage it well enough and recover, train every day. If you can't, simple answer is don't train as much. So that is everything for this side of the Q&A.
We have got one more question, actually.
Yeah? Oh.
Yeah.
Go on, then.
We had a question.
Get that question up. I'm going to get my energy drink review.
When to take a break / deload / recovery? Right. I'll wait for Joel to return.
I am back.
What's that?
That is my energy drink of the week. Mango Loco.
I haven't got one this week.
Shit house.
All the selection in my local store was rubbish. That's actually an interesting looking can. The thing is, right?
We need to educate on the
Did you hear the question? When to take a break / deload / recovery? I think people get attached to the idea of a deload, and they romanticize the deload week simply because, I don't think a deload is needed as often as, at the end of each training block. But it
Okay.
also depends on the level of the individual. If you're a high level strength athlete, you might want to deload more frequently, just because you're so used to adapting, like the stimulus you're giving. Your stimulus to fatigue ratio is lower, so your stimulus is a little bit less. You're getting less stimulus for the amount of work you put in, but you're still getting the same level of neuromuscular stress. Do you get me? Yeah. So that's where you'd place in deloads a little bit more frequently. Or whereas if you're like a relatively new lifter, you probably won't have to deload for the first couple of phases, just because it's such a new output for you.
I miss those days.
Adapt.
Those days.
Newbie gains are real. Like, you adapt like so quickly and so well and so linearly in that first initial year of training. You're never going to really need to deload unless you are just cooking yourself. It's just about managing the load a little. If you manage your training load, because ultimately you don't want to deload, because deloading is taking you out of that place where you're developing. So the better, I would say, put less focus on deloading and more focus on managing your training load well and managing your recovery strategies optimally. So like getting your sleep, getting like, the right amount of sets and like that kind of thing. Minimum effective dose, whatever you've got to do. But, I don't think a deload should be placed like that often unless you peak, like, sort of like in the dog end of like, a pre-season, or you leading up to like a fight bout or something like that.
Yeah,
so gotta kind of like recuperate and stuff.
Can I just put a little thing? A deload shouldn't really be called a deload. It should be called a devolume, because you can still handle good intensities and they're still going to have less effect, because the amount of volume you do in a week is what drives fatigue normally. So the more volume you do, the more fatigued you're going to be. Just because you're in a state of a training block, you shouldn't drop intensities. So some people like to do a deload where they go like, I'll take 5-3-1, popular example. Week 1, 75, 80, 85%. Week 2, 80, 85, 90. Week 3, you're going to go 75, 85, 95, maybe test for a 1 rep max or a plus set. Then week 4 is 65, 70, 75. Drop in that intensity. Whereas I would probably say you're allowed to keep intensity quite high, but just half the amount of sets you normally do or something like that. That's what I tend to do, is keep the intensity there, so they're still used to getting that, because it does take a training effect of getting a heavy barbell on your back is something that you need to train. And you can get away with keeping that in there, just half the reps you do, half the sets, something like that, to keep the volume down. So then you get that fatigue back, readiness when you've dropped that fatigue. So like, perfect example is, I know rugby players go through the preseason phase, and to that dog end, they absolutely beast you for a week or 2, 3 sometimes, put you in a hole, but then they give you such an easy week leading up to that competition. They do it in the Six Nations, and you get that easy week, and then that fatigue plummets quickly, and you get that super compensation, and you ride that bout of super compensation then. But the reason why they put that deload in is because they've intentionally put their athlete in a hole. If you're not in a hole and you're still progressing your training, you don't need a deload.
Corona.
So that answers all the questions. Now we have got.
What you got there, bro? Tell the viewers what you got.
This is a. We gotta get a nice little screen grab of this. Pick of the week. So we've got Mango Loco Monster Juiced. So
I do like the juiced, the ones, but I can't rationalize drinking calories.
Just read the back of the can, bro.
Boy, there's like 60 grams of sugar in there.
58 grams of sugar.
That's diabetes
Sorry,
in a can,
man.
bro.
But
10 out of 10 flavor, minus 10 for the diabetes you get with it.
like I said before, right, we'll go 60-second review in die.
Let's
3,
go,
Royal.
diabito. Let's go.
So we've got a lovely can, like
Oh,
you
he's
chuck
taking
it
a
on the
while.
mantelpiece somewhere. Then sides of the can, I'm not a fan of 500ml. Drinking a lot before I train, but we'll give
Yeah,
it a
but
little...
you're assuming people just drink these before they train.
It tastes splendid. It tastes like mango juice. Like, I know that's the flavour, mango loco.
I haven't got an
But
energy drink to give you a review of this week, but can I just say how nice the pink one is? Have you tried
I've
the
never
pink,
tried it.
it's like passion something or whatever? Oh,
No.
oh, mate, like sublime.
So, my quick little review. Taste is like innocent smoothie out of 10. You know, they're the sort of smoothies that you pick every time at your meal deal just to save
Yeah.
some money. And then with this, probably on the convenience factor of people that like to use energy drinks when they're dieting and keep things. If you're chugging down 245 calories worth of energy drink, for me, that is 10% of my daily calories, give or take, when I'm cutting. So not really ideal.
No. And
Convenience factor is probably like a 3 out of 10. If you're on a bulk, go for it.
well,
Sugar
go
content's
for it.
pretty high. Sugar content's pretty high. Need to watch out on that. But
Do
overall,
you need to watch out on
taste,
sugar?
yeah, we won't get into ins and out of this, but probably too much sugar ain't bad, especially in the fact of you're chugging it down
Yeah.
an energy drink.
Coming from diabeto, we don't. This is what I mean. Like I thought we were exclusively reviewing 0-calorie beverages. That's why I didn't pick anything up this week.
Oh, grow up in it. But right, this I would say taste is like a solid 9. Like you just feel too guilty because you know it's full of
looking
sugar.
at the can, you know it tastes good. If people who are listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, let me just do a detailed description of what this can looks like, right? You've got a lovely sea, like barley sea blue can, right? With some like Aztec, you know, Mayan like style
Day of the
skulls and
Dead shit.
stuff. Yeah, Day of the Dead skulls. And then you got a lovely yellow M embossed into the can with big capital letters saying juiced in yellow with the contrasting white monster logo at the bottom.
For the listeners, that yellow is actually orange.
It looks yellow to me. Sorry, my white balance might be off.
Yeah, really tasty, but convenience factor. Fitness factor out of 10 is probably a 4.
What are we should give ourselves a criteria. So we've got taste, convenience,
Fitness ability. We'll go fitness ability.
Fitness ability. Fitness in my mouth.
Right. So before we go off on another tangent, that is episode 4 of the Archive podcast. We haven't had a response from the other Archive podcast, so we're here to stay. Happy retirement.
Hang on. What about this weekly schedule, guys? We got a weekly schedule going. We're 3 episodes deep. We're on Spotify and Apple. Can't be calling out us when you don't upload podcasts.
Hang on. Right, on that weekly schedule bit. So we've got the Archive podcast on a Monday. We've got the breakdown on a Thursday. We're going to put some Q&A boxes on the Instagram, probably on the Tuesday and Friday nights for the breakdown and then the upcoming podcast. So leave your suggestions there. Dan, if you want to run through the socials.
So if you don't know by now, we are Instagram.com/archive.podcast. My Instagram is Instagram.com/Dan Evans PT. And Joel is Instagram.com/JoelHarris.pt. Don't forget the dot, because if you don't put the dot in, you won't find your boy. And if you don't find your boy, you miss out on all the great content that he's got over on his Instagram.
Exactly.
A lot of towels
you can
over
find
there,
the Archive podcast on Instagram, as we ran through, but then we are also live on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts to watch each Monday around 6 p.m. sharp.
Which, can I just say, you can find all the links to our listening sources on our Instagram, instagram.com/archive.podcast.
in the link tree. So that has been episode 4. We've chatted
Uh,
menstrual cycle, rants, and a couple of listener
yeah,
questions.
we waffled
So,
on. We waffled on. We chatted a bit of shit, you know. Thanks for listening, guys,
but
as always. Thanks for supporting the podcast. You guys were, regular listeners. Thank you ever so much. And we will see you next week for the 5th installment of the Archive podcast.
peace.
Thanks for listening. Bye.